Welcome to the very first episode of Braver Leadership, the podcast for leaders who know the game has changed and that doing more, pushing harder, and reacting faster isn't the answer anymore. I'm Hannah, and in this opening conversation, we're exploring a question that's quietly shaping boardrooms, team dynamics, and individual careers across the world. What does it really mean to be braver in the age of artificial intelligence? I'm joined by the founder of Braver Leadership, Browne. Ian, you've said something powerful, that most leaders aren't actually afraid of AI itself, but of something far more human. Can you start by sharing what you're seeing?
Yes, absolutely. When I talk to experienced leaders, from the chiefs to directors to ambitious mid-career professionals, what I hear isn't fear of technology. It's something deeper. It's this quiet anxiety that they're becoming less visible, less chosen, less central to the future narrative. There's a growing sense that somehow the rules have shifted, and while they've been running full speed, adapting to every new system thrown at them, they're now being told that they're already behind. As if their decades of leadership experience is suddenly irrelevant because a new tool has entered the room.
So it's not the technology itself, it's the story people are being told about themselves in relation to that technology.
Exactly. And that story is loud. It says, only the young will thrive. Only the ultra-digital, ultra-fast, ultra-public will matter. And what I'm seeing is leaders internalising that narrative and questioning their edge, wondering if they still have time to adapt, or if their best years are already behind them. But I think the truth will turn out to be something different. Leadership in this era isn't about knowing every tool. It's about how you show up inside uncertainty. Artificial intelligence doesn't eliminate the need for human leadership. It intensifies it.
Which is such an important distinction because we often hear AI discussed as if it's competing directly with human leaders, rather than transforming what leadership itself requires. And that brings us to braver. You've built this not as another leadership model, not as a checklist, but as what you call a compass for leading in a world of accelerating change. Before we dive into each element, can you explain why braver is necessary right now?
The pace of change is no longer unusual. It's the environment. Leaders aren't being asked to survive waves of disruption anymore. They're being asked to lead from within them, continuously. In that landscape, performance tactics, working harder, sprinting toward the next goal, proving you're still relevant through speed, actually create fragility. What leaders need now is inner clarity, emotional steadiness, and the ability to adapt without losing who they are. That's what braver is built on. It's not theoretical, it's behavioural. It's how you become the kind of leader teams trust in uncertainty, not because you have every answer, but because you're the calmest and clearest person in the room.
And what struck me when I first heard you talk about braver is that it's a response to noise. Because the world right now is loud. Everyone is reacting. Everyone is broadcasting. But you're saying the leader of the future isn't the one who shouts the loudest. It's the one who stays human, clear, and credible in systems that increasingly aren't.
Yes, that's exactly it. Anyone can use AI to produce information. What's scarce, and therefore what's valuable, is the ability to bring meaning to that information, to hold tension without spiralling, to keep people focused when everything is uncertain. Speed alone is no longer a differentiator. Presence is.
Before we step into the 6 braver capacities, I want to pause on something you just said, because it feels like a turning point for this whole conversation. You said speed is no longer a differentiator. Presence is. That runs directly against the current leadership narrative, which says that visibility, productivity, and relentless urgency are how you prove your worth. What you are suggesting sounds almost rebellious.
It is rebellious because it challenges the myth that the leaders who move fastest will win. AI has exposed that myth. AI will always move faster. It will always produce more content, more outputs, more surface-level noise. So if a leader ties their value to speed, they've already lost. But if a leader ties their value to presence, to being the person who can interpret complexity, who can filter out noise and create clarity, then they become irreplaceable. That's the distinction. I replaces noise. It does not replace discernment.
And that leads us right into the first core capacity of braver behavioural credibility, which I think is one of the most powerful parts of this model, because you're saying leadership isn't about your title or your intent. It's about your patterns. It's about what people can count on from you when the pressure is highest.
That's exactly right. Behavioural credibility means this. You are what you repeatedly do. It's no longer enough to have a vision or to speak well about leadership. Your credibility is demonstrated in how you show up in the everyday moments, especially when no one is watching, and especially when things get uncomfortable. In the age of AI, people are looking for evidence. They want to know, can I trust you when everything is uncertain? Can I rely on your actions, not your promises? Behavioural credibility is about consistency. It's about patterns that build trust through presence, not performance.
So this isn't about perfection or about having all the answers. It's about reliability. It's about being the person whose actions align with their values, even when it costs them.
Yes, and leaders sometimes get this wrong because they think credibility is about never making mistakes. But that's actually brittle leadership. Behavioural credibility is about how you respond when you do make mistakes. It's whether your decision-making is anchored in what you stand for rather than how you want to be perceived. In a world that rewards quick reactions, behavioural credibility rewards considered responses. It invites leaders to step out of the performance cycle and into grounded leadership, where your presence speaks louder than your output.
You've said before that behavioural credibility is the antidote to what you call performative survival mode. What do you mean by that?
Performative survival mode is when leaders start reacting from fear, trying to prove they still matter by being hyper-visible, always on, always in motion. It feels productive, but it slowly erodes their credibility because people can sense when actions are driven by anxiety rather than alignment. Behavioural credibility says, you don't need to prove your relevance through volume. You demonstrate it through your steadiness, and that steadiness is more valuable now than ever, because in an environment of AI-generated noise, human trust is the ultimate differentiator.
So if someone is listening right now and thinking, I've been operating in survival mode, but I don't know how to step off the treadmill, where would you have them begin?
Start by observing your patterns without judgment. Ask yourself, when I feel pressure, do I speed up or do I slow down to think? Do I react to be seen or do I respond to create clarity? You don't need to change everything at once. Behavioural credibility builds through small, consistent actions. Consistency outlasts intensity.
It strikes me that in a world obsessed with innovation, you're reminding leaders that trust is still the most powerful leadership technology we have, and it's one that can't be automated.
Exactly. In times of uncertainty, people don't follow the leader who knows the most. They follow the leader they trust the most. And trust is built behaviourally, not verbally.
The second capacity in braver might be the one most leaders feel before they understand it. You call it regulated presence, the ability to stay steady when others spiral. And I think this is where we see the difference between leaders who are simply reacting to AI and those who are actually capable of leading through it. Can you explain what regulated presence is not and why it matters so much right now?
Regulated presence is often mistaken for staying calm or controlling your emotions, but it's much deeper than that. It's not suppression, it's not detachment, it's the skill of noticing your internal state before it hijacks your leadership. It's the ability to direct your mind instead of being directed by it. We are living in a time when leaders are absorbing constant input, news cycles, market volatility, AI discourse, performance dashboards, and their nervous systems are overstimulated. When a leader is unregulated, their teams feel it. The organisation doesn't get direction, it gets the leader's fear transmitted at scale.
So this is more than individual resilience. It's emotional and mental leadership hygiene. It's the difference between leading from a place of fear and leading from clarity.
Exactly. Regulated presence is the new executive function. In a disrupted world, your ability to stay grounded is your competitive edge, because your team, your stakeholders, even your clients, they don't need you to be perfect. They need you to be present. And this links deeply with the positive intelligence work I use. We now have evidence showing that when leaders operate from an unregulated state, what we call saboteur mode, their brains are literally in survival circuitry. They lose access to empathy, creativity, collaboration, and complex problem solving. They are reacting rather than leading.
This is fascinating because we're talking about AI and the future of leadership, but you're saying the differentiator won't be who has the best tools, but who has the clearest mind using those tools.
Yes, AI will amplify whatever state you are in. If your mind is anxious, you'll use AI anxiously, trying to outpace everyone. If your mind is grounded, you'll use AI creatively and strategically, because you're not using it to prove your worth. You're using it to expand your impact. Regulated presence is what allows leaders to bring discernment to disruption. When your nervous system is regulated, you're not just available to others, you're available to your own intelligence.
And what's powerful about this is that it reframes emotional regulation as a leadership skill, not a wellness add-on. This isn't about self-care in the traditional sense. It's about leadership performance at the highest level.
Absolutely. The myth is that regulation is self-indulgent. The truth is that it's essential to performance. A dysregulated leader will always create volatility around them. A regulated leader creates psychological safety, which is the foundation for innovation, accountability, and trust. When you regulate your own mind, you become a stabilizing force in systems that are unstable, and that is deeply valued. You become the anchor, not the amplifier, of chaos.
So if behavioural credibility is about being consistent in what you do, regulated presence is about being consistent in how you are.
Yes, leadership is both behavioural and energetic. Your presence communicates before you speak. And in an age of AI, where knowledge is abundant and noise is everywhere, presence becomes your true signal.
We've explored behavioural credibility and regulated presence, two capacities that anchor a leader internally. The third capacity, in braver, shifts our attention to what leaders do in motion. You call this adaptive capacity. And I know this concept goes far beyond basic agility or flexibility. What distinguishes adaptive capacity in the braver model?
Adaptive capacity isn't about reacting quickly or constantly reinventing yourself. It's about moving at speed without losing depth. Many leaders are reacting to AI by scrambling, launching initiatives, chasing trends, constantly shifting direction. That's not adaptation, that's reactivity. Adaptive capacity is the ability to navigate change while staying rooted in your core identity and purpose. It's agility with discernment. It allows you to make strategic pivots without abandoning your leadership integrity.
So it's the difference between being blown by the wind and sailing with intention.
Exactly. AI isn't asking leaders to become different people. It's asking them to become deeper versions of themselves, to know what they stand for, so they can adapt intelligently. Leaders who lack adaptive capacity either cling to the past or chase the future blindly. Adaptive leaders can hold tension and still choose wisely.
Which leads us straight into the fourth, braver capacity, values in motion. I love this phrase because it suggests that values aren't something you write on a wall. They're something you act on when pressure mounts.
Yes. Values in motion is about how you translate what matters into how you lead when it's inconvenient. In an I-driven world, leaders will face constant pressure to optimize, sometimes at the expense of ethics, humanity, or sustainability. Values in motion says decisions made purely in response to external pressure create short-term wins but long-term erosion. The leaders who retain relevance in the AI age will be the ones whose actions are anchored in values that create trust, because trust compounds. AI can't replicate that.
So this is where leadership becomes legacy. I can handle transactions, but values drive transformation.
Exactly. And in a noisy world, alignment becomes your clarity tool. When you act in alignment with what truly matters, you stop reacting to every trend and start leading with intention. Oh, I may accelerate decision making, but values determine the quality of those decisions.
Which brings us to a quality that some people mistake for a soft skill, when in reality, it may become the differentiator of leadership in the next decade. Empathetic edge, the fifth capacity, in braver. What is the empathetic edge and why edge?
Empathy is often misunderstood as being agreeable or emotionally comforting. But empathy is not weakness, it's intelligence. In leadership, empathetic edge is the ability to deeply understand the human context around you and then act courageously based on that insight. It's the edge because it gives you strategic advantage. Leaders who understand context can see emerging signals before others. They know what their people fear, what they hope for, what motivates them. That insight allows them to mobilize teams, shape culture, and influence outcomes AI can't reach.
So empathy isn't about being liked. It's about being deeply connected to reality.
Exactly. Without empathy, leaders default to control. With empathy, leaders build commitment. AI can automate tasks, but it cannot build trust, resolve tension, or inspire action. Empathetic edge turns human connection into strategic capability.
That's so important because it reframes empathy from soft to scalable. In a world of automation, human connection becomes the currency leaders trade in.
Yes, and what I find powerful about this is that it returns humanity to the centre of leadership, not as a moral token, but as a competitive advantage. The leaders who cultivate empathetic edge won't be replaced by AI. They'll be amplified by it.
We've walked through 5 core capacities of braver, each one powerful in its own right. But the final capacity is what turns experience into evolution. It's called reflective intelligence. And you've said this is what separates leaders who grow from leaders who repeat. Tell us what that means.
Reflective intelligence is the ability to extract wisdom from your own leadership instead of simply collecting years in a role. It's not about looking back, it's about looking inward with intention. It's how you turn every challenge, every success, every disruption into strategic insight. In the age of AI, information is everywhere, but intelligence, human intelligence, comes from reflection. When leaders lack reflective intelligence, they confuse activity with progress. They repeat patterns because they don't step back to interpret them. But leaders who reflect don't just move through change, they accelerate through it because they're continually learning from themselves.
So this is the integrator. Behavioural credibility, regulated presence, adaptive capacity, values in motion, empathetic edge. All of them depend on a leader's ability to pause, to reflect, and to grow.
Exactly. Braver isn't a checklist, it's a living compass. Each capacity builds on the others, and together they form a leadership identity that's deeply human, highly relevant, and non-automatable. AI is transforming the mechanics of work, but it is also revealing what remains distinctly human. And that is where leaders have their opportunity.
Which brings us to the question you began this whole movement with. Are you operating from urgency or from clarity? Because if leaders are honest, many will admit they've been operating from survival mode. And what you're offering is not a new set of tactics. It's a return to grounded leadership.
Yes, leaders don't need more noise, but if we know one thing for certain about AI, is that the workplace is becoming noisier every day. Leaders can't avoid this noise. They need a compass that helps them navigate it. Braver is that compass. It restores agency. It brings leaders back to themselves so they can lead others forward with confidence and calm.
So this episode is our beginning. And next week we enter Chapter 1. Beyond Resilience. building mental fitness for the long haul. Can you give us a glimpse of where we're going?
Absolutely. Resilience has been the leadership buzzword for over a decade, but resilience is no longer enough. It's reactive. Mental fitness is proactive. In Chapter 1, we'll explore the hum of burnout before it breaks you, how leaders lose clarity without realizing it, and how to rebuild your inner operating system so that pressure no longer becomes a personal threat. If leadership in the AI era requires clarity, then mental fitness is how we access it. And it's going to be a powerful conversation. And if you're listening to this and thinking, this is exactly what I've been feeling, but I didn't have words for it, that's the signal. You're not alone. And you're not behind. You're right on time.
If you want to follow this journey in depth, where every chapter, reflection, and leadership pause is released as part of the Braver Leadership series, make sure you're subscribed to Ian's newsletter. The link is in the show notes. And Ian, for those who are ready to apply this work personally, who don't just want to understand it, but want to live it, how can they reach you?
I work privately with a very small number of leaders each quarter, people who are ready to do this work with intention, not intensity. People that I get to know personally so we can build trust, dismantle all the performance and holding a brave face that we become so good at in leadership. If that resonates with you, you'll find a link in the show notes where you can reach out. If you feel something waking up in you as you're listening, don't ignore it. That feeling is your edge, and now is the moment to lead from it. This is the age of artificial intelligence, but it is also the age of human leadership. Not louder, not faster, braver.
Thank you for being part of this first conversation. We'll see you next week as we begin Chapter 1.